I'll be honest with you. I wasn't sure we would ever see Roe versus Wade
Yeah.
overturned, and God forgive me for even not believing that that might happen. So I want to believe with my whole heart that yes, we can make abortion unthinkable, illegal, and unthinkable in our lifetimes.
Yeah, we're going to have to change the culture and we're going to have to change the laws in order to do that. So Christians and people of conscience have to stand up and make a difference. Welcome to Indie Thinker with Reed Huberman. You're about to make the jump from the dishonest mainstream media into free and independent thought from key thought leaders on the subjects of culture, causes, politics, and faith. Welcome to Indie Thinker with Reed Huberman. I am elated to have on the program today Candy Clepper. Candy Clepper is the president at Tennessee Right to Life of Greater Chattanooga. And Right to Life, for those of you who don't know, is the nation's oldest pro-life organization dedicated to defending and advocating for the right of life of all innocent human beings, born and unborn. Candy, thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you for having me, Reed.
It's an absolute pleasure. So I really want to take a moment to celebrate with you what just took place yesterday. Before we do that, let's give our audience a little bit of context and just help them know what Right to Life is, or even Tennessee Right to Life, so that they can know what you guys have been busy doing, and then maybe even that'll give us an appreciation for what yesterday meant to you guys with the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Now, of course, we're filming this on Saturday, going live on Sunday, so we're actually talking about the big monumental decision of the overturning of Roe v. Wade and the Supreme Court coming out and the things that they said. I think we're going to dive into it. Just really, really interesting things to discuss. But needless to say, before we get there, give us a little snapshot of what Tennessee Right to Life is, what you guys do.
Okay. Well, so as you mentioned, I am president. I'm honored to serve as president of Greater Chattanooga Right to Life, and we are a chapter of Tennessee Right to Life. Tennessee Right to Life is our state's oldest pro-life organization, and we're an affiliate of the National Right to Life Committee. And so we are Greater Chattanooga Right to Life. Let me start there. We are an all volunteer organization, and we defend and advocate for the right to life, like you mentioned in your opening, of all innocent human beings, born and unborn, as we say, in all ages, stages, and conditions. We believe every human being from conception to natural death has immeasurable dignity and an unalienable right to life.
Yep.
In our mission, there's a lot of different pro-life agencies and groups and different ways of working and advocating in the pro-life arena. Our mission is pro-life education and legislation. So that's the focus of our mission.
So with that being said, yesterday must have been a very big day for you. I have a very small level of ability to celebrate, because all I've done, since I started this podcast, was stage conversations that I felt were helpful to people on these issues, that tried to address certainly the Christian perspective on life issues and the pro-life stance. And I felt a little bit of pride yesterday, thinking that I might have a very small kind of crumb-like, role in what took place yesterday. You guys, with your with what you do with legislation and what you do with educating people, obviously have a much broader and more important role in the pro-life community and in what took place yesterday. So on a personal level, I'm just curious, how did yesterday feel to you?
I was like on cloud nine. I mean, it was a victory. We were on pins and needles, so to speak, to see what the Supreme Court was going to do. Of course, the decision was leaked a few weeks ago, but we weren't counting on it, so to speak. We were still praying. And first and foremost, to God be the glory. This is his fight, and we're soldiers in his army. And, those of us in Tennessee Right to Life, like I mentioned, we're our state's oldest pro-life organization. Those of us who are in it now, we are standing on the shoulders of those who came before us, because for nearly 50 years, as you are well aware, we have been under the erroneous Roe versus Wade decision as the law of the land. And those efforts that Tennessee Right to Life started right as Roe got decided, up until today, our efforts, and not just Tennessee Right to Life, so many, and don't downplay what you've done. The prayers of so many people is the number one thing that has brought us to where we are today. And so that decision, the Dobbs decision, as it's being called, the Dobbs, I think it was Dobbs versus Jackson, the Mississippi case, as everybody's calling it, by the Supreme Court of the United States. I mean, it's a landmark decision. It is monumental. It's historic, and it is going to save millions of innocent lives across our nation.
Yeah, I don't know if you have the numbers for this, but I think it was 63 million babies have been aborted in the 49, going on 50 years since Roe v. Wade, something like that.
Sadly, yes. And that, there's no way, honestly, to really know because there's not consistent reporting requirements.
Right.
But yes, you are correct. 63 million lives just snuffed out before they even have a chance to get started.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about this because I think this would be important for people to know, more broadly speaking. But I want to dig into the conversation around what took place. But let's talk about some of the things that you know in terms of what this means for residents specifically of Tennessee. I know our listener base is bigger than this, but a lot of conversation right now is happening around the Big 13. So these are the states that are going to eliminate abortion altogether in their state. So Tennessee happens to be one of those. So what can we expect moving forward now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned, at least in the state of Tennessee, as far as access to abortion is concerned?
Right. So there are two laws that really were impacted in Tennessee by yesterday's decision. One is the heartbeat bill, as it's known in general. And my understanding is, and I'll tell you, I was on the road yesterday. I was in a press conference with Tennessee Right to Life. So I didn't hear a lot of the other things that were being said in the media. But our Attorney General Slatter, I can never say his name right. My understanding is he has already done whatever needs to be done. I'm not an attorney, so I'm not going to say these words right, but done whatever needs to be done to put the heartbeat bill in effect. So basically it was enjoined. My understanding is it was enjoined by the whichever circuit we're in. I think it's the Sixth Circuit. And he has already petitioned them, or whatever the words are, to get that unjoined. I'm using the wrong words, but to get that put in effect. So that's one. And then the other one, and Tennessee Right to Life supported this bill and was very instrumental in getting it passed. And that is, it's what is typically called a trigger bill. It's the Human Life Protection Act. And it was passed in 2019. And what that bill says is that when Roe versus Wade gets overturned, then our abortion laws will revert basically back to what they were pre-Roe, which is that abortion is going to be banned, prohibited, illegal, whatever words you want to use, in all cases, except when the life of the mother is at risk.
Okay.
And so we expect that is going to go in effect. I think what it said was like 30 days after the decision. So, this is brand new. It just happened yesterday. So we're all waiting to see kind of how all this works, but that is what we expect to happen.
Yeah. All right. So let's hone down a little bit deeper and then talk about what that means kind of more locally for us here in Chattanooga, just because I think it could serve for maybe an example of kind of maybe what to expect, or what are some of the repercussions of what took place on Friday with the overturning of Roe v. Wade. So one of the big things for us here locally is that Planned Parenthood has not had a footprint in our city, and we're just moving in kind of in the beginning. I don't want to be wrong with timeline, but around the end of 2020, 2021, they had planned moving back in here to Chattanooga. So maybe just as a way of trying to gauge what this means for Planned Parenthood, what does that do to them here in Chattanooga now that this has taken place? Does that mean they pack up shop and go home?
Well, that's a great question. So they let me first say, and you touched on this, we are so blessed in Chattanooga. We have not had an abortion facility here since the early 90s. And there is an amazing story. If you're not familiar with it, or your listeners aren't, just go look it up. You can read about it online, and you can still find people around Chattanooga who can tell the story. But it was amazing, God's miracle, that an abortion facility that used to be here actually is what got changed to. It got bought by some pro-lifers and got changed to what is now Choices, and where the National Memorial for the Unborn is out on Vance Road, which Choices, our pregnancy resource center here, they have since moved because they outgrew the building. I mean, just amazing work of God. But anyway, so we haven't had an abortion facility here. And so, like you mentioned, Planned Parenthood, we got wind of this, I think it was March of 2020, actually. I'd have to look back, but I think it was March of 2020. May have been 2021. All the years are running together with the pandemic and everything. But we got wind that Planned Parenthood had hired 2 staff in Chattanooga. They have hired a health educator and a community organizer. They do not have a facility here. As far as we know, they haven't. They could pop up, I don't think they will now with this decision from yesterday, but they could have popped up with a facility, an office, a business, whatever, without us being aware. But as far as we've been aware, they have not tried to open a facility. It was more trying to build support, right?
And I don't think they're going to
find it here in Chattanooga, because by and large, Chattanooga is a pro-life place.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a subtle implication here, because the big talk of Planned Parenthood has always been we're about women's health, right? But it's so interesting that Planned Parenthood now is the subject of every news coverage so that they can whine and moan about the fact that now they can no longer provide abortions, which I think is very telling that actually we all know the truth, which is that they were abortion providers by and large, the largest abortion provider in the nation. So yeah, I think it's interesting to kind of see what will happen with them and what all of the arguments that we've heard come from Planned Parenthood over the years as they've raked in millions of dollars of federal funding. What we'll see now in the wake of Roe v. Wade. Will they double down on women's health, or are they going to do the best they can to lobby for continued abortions, to fight against the Constitution and fight against the Supreme Court ruling? So all of that may be conjecture, but I think we all know that they've tipped their hand too many times to do anything other than reveal to us what they're really about, which is to make sure that women have access to abortions. Now, it does bring me to this other thing. Now, you may not be able to speak to this, but I've been contemplating this and discussing this with a couple of different people, that ultimately Planned Parenthood has probably a reason to complain, because although not specifically involved in the decision that was made on Friday by the Supreme Court, there are implications perhaps for Planned Parenthood. And maybe a lot of people don't even know this, and this is why I bring it up, that they get millions, tens of millions, almost hundreds of millions of dollars every single year from the federal government if abortion is no longer federally protected and it does go down to a state's decision. Does that mean that federal funding that was kind of protected before, and that became their argument for keeping that funding and getting that funding, does that funding now go away now that Roe v. Wade is no longer the law of the land?
Well, you've said a lot there, Reed. So let me talk a little bit about some of the things that you brought up. Now, the funding, that's a good question. I don't know. So the interesting part about the funding is it is supposedly not allowed to be used for abortions. Of course, we know money is fungible, right? You give me money for bread and say, don't go buy a bottle of whiskey with it. Well, I'll just use my money to buy my whiskey and use your money to buy my bread. I mean, it's all the same, right? But they say that the money that they get from the federal government, our tax dollars, which I think is like over $500 million. I mean, no, $500 million. Sorry. Wow. Like 600. The last figure I saw was like $680 million. That's a lot of zeros.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money.
Well,
But
by the way, I do have to dovetail here and just say that they also then dole out, as a nonprofit, that they dole out to liberal and Democratic candidates.
oh, absolutely. Yes, that's exactly right. I
But
mean,
churches are not supposed to advocate for any candidate, left or right. But of course, Planned Parenthood can give tens of millions of dollars to Joe Biden.
right. Follow the money.
Yeah.
Always follow the money. But, and the other, of course, I think they've even stopped trying to say this, but, they used to say, and they may still try to say it, abortion is only, quote, 3% of our business, which is crazy. I mean, that's been debunked, the way that they do the numbers. And of course, statistics, you can make them anything you want to make them. But so I don't know what's going to happen with their federal funding, but, we need to get rid of that. Regardless of Roe, this money should have been long stopped, long ago. So we, as far as Planned Parenthood here in Chattanooga, I don't know what's going to happen, but I mean, let's just talk about Tennessee. Like, I would think they're going to have to close their clinics. Mm-hmm. I don't even like to call them clinics, because abortion is not healthcare, regardless of what they try to say, their euphemisms they use. But, I would think they're going to have to close their abortion facilities, because, it is going to be prohibited here in Tennessee. Of course, we know their game plan, the whole abortion industry, their game plan are these medication abortions, the abortion pills, the chemical abortions, which we just passed in Tennessee. One of the laws that we just got passed in this legislative session that just ended, and the governor has signed it, is that no doctor can prescribe the abortion pills through telemedicine, through telehealth.
Yes.
They have to do it in person. Well, if you have to be in person, but you can't do it in Tennessee because now abortion is prohibited, we shouldn't be having any chemical abortions. Now, of course, people are going to get them through the mail. They're going to do all these things. And so the point, I guess, is our work is not over, right? Like 100%. It's not like Roe versus Wade got overturned yesterday and now Tennessee Right to Life, we're going to lock our doors and say, oh, good job, we're done. We're not done by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, we still are going to be, of course, the other part about Planned Parenthood is they're not going to just take this lying down. We know they've probably already filed their lawsuits today, probably yesterday. They are going to challenge this. And, Planned Parenthood and the whole abortion industry, they claim, you mentioned about, they say they're for women. I call, they are not for women, because if they were, so every parental consent law in the nation that states have passed, they have challenged them. Here in Tennessee, they have challenged our 48-hour waiting period. They have challenged informed consent. I mean, they have challenged, get this, they have challenged us having the facilities, the clinics, to be inspected and meet certain standards. I mean,
isn't that crazy?
If you are for women, why would you not be for common sense protections? So no, they're not for women. They're also not for choice. They like to use their euphemism pro-choice. Well, yesterday's decision was about as pro-choice as you can get, because what yesterday's decision did, it didn't make abortion illegal across the United States. It simply turned that back over to the states to decide. Well, who decides in the state? We do, the voters, the citizens. We elect representatives. And so now we truly have the choice, instead of it being decided by 9 unelected judges. So if you truly want choice, then you should be in favor of what occurred yesterday.
Yeah, that's so good, because, and I want to stop there for just a moment, because I think so much of what we're hearing belies the ignorance that around this issue and the emotional nature of this issue, which, hey, I understand, right? If you're a mother and you're single and you're pregnant, right? This is a scary thing, right? I had a child after years of full-time ministry, which we don't get paid very much. I had a second child that wasn't necessarily planned, and it was a scary moment for it. Not for us. Not once did I think about aborting our kid, but it was a scary moment because we're like, how are we going to afford this? What do we do? But the truth is that there's so much ignorance around this issue. I did a whole podcast with Jenny, who I know is a friend of yours, to just talk about we're talking about Christians, being ready. And I'm just like, well, we like, not all, but like we have been. Christians have been on the forefront of fighting this issue and standing up for children in the womb, outside of the womb, and for parents. Every step along the way to help them with education, to help them with jobs, to help them acquire vehicles, help them get cribs, help them get diapers, all of these things. We have been busying ourselves doing this stuff. And if you don't know that, it's just simply because you don't know or you don't care to know. There's so much ignorance about what just took place yesterday. And so much of what we're hearing belies the fact that these people, I think by and large, who are in the pro-choice community, they actually think that abortion across the board was totally restricted across the nation. They think that Roe v. Wade gave access to abortion or gave a federal mandate for abortion across the board. And that when it's taken away, now abortion is going to go away, which you said it beautifully. The point with what took place yesterday is if you're actually pro-choice, what just took place is that now you have the choice where your tax dollars go to. And you also illustrated the fact that it also doesn't really take abortion away. There's ways that people are going to be able to access abortion without even having to cross state lines, not to mention that you can still cross state lines and access abortion in states where it's accessible. So while I want to be honest and say, get rid of it altogether across the nation and as far and wide as we possibly can, the truth of what just happened yesterday is that abortion is still very real in America and is now going to a state-by-state case. But so many people don't have any concept of what Roe v. Wade actually is.
Well, all of that is absolutely correct. And you're right. I mean, we are still praying for abortion to not only be illegal, but to be unthinkable. So Our work is in no way done. We celebrate what happened yesterday. It was a great step. And now we get back to it, right? Yeah. Like we are going to be, so we know we're going to be fighting against the lawsuits that Planned Parenthood is going to file against what happened yesterday. And the other big thing is, they call for codifying Roe. Well, the flip side of that is we would love to codify making abortion illegal as a federal thing because it's still killing children.
Yeah.
And we want to, we would love to be a nation that does not prey on women to make them believe that it's empowering to kill your own child. That is not empowering. Yes. That is not, for one thing, it's not God's design for those of us who are Christians. But, even if you take the religious perspective out of it, right? Because one of the things they want to tout is this is you and your religion. Don't put your religion on me.
Don't shove it on me.
Even if you take the religious perspective out of it, just follow the science. I mean, it is undisputable that is a human life.
Yeah, you'll get a kick. You'll get a kick out of this, Candy. I posted just this past week. I think it was Tuesday. NASA found a boulder perched atop kind of a mountain, and they were declaring it a sign of life. And so I posted that directly next to an ultrasound of a baby in the womb, and I said, now, this is why we don't believe you when you say you follow the science, because you believe this is a sign of life, but you do not believe that is a sign of life. You don't believe that is a human being in the womb. So yeah, it's crazy.
You can't follow their quote logic to any logical conclusions.
Yeah.
I mean, another thing that I talk about is, of course, there are bald eagles are protected and the whales are protected. And if we as a nation were killing puppies before they were born, our society would be outraged.
Yeah, Sarah McLachlan on every channel.
Absolutely. So there's a huge disconnect. And the other thing about the abortion industry, they like to use words like abortion care or health care. They do not do what they do because they care about women or they care about anybody else. They care about money. And don't ever lose sight of the fact they profit. They profit greatly from abortions. And when a woman walks into their facility, they're not trying to give her choices. They're not laying out here, you can parent, you can go with an adoption plan, or you can have an abortion. That is not what they do. They are not trying to provide a woman a choice. They're trying to sell her an abortion. And there's so many people, even in the church, Reed, and I'm sure you're very familiar with this. Even in the church, people are deceived by that. They think, some people do, not everybody, of course, but some people, they think, oh, Planned Parenthood, they do all these good things. They do all this health care, and then kind of, 3% on the side, they do abortions. Well, what I would say to that is, first of all, that's not even true. But even if it were, what if it were 3%? It's still not a good thing to kill human beings.
Yeah, there's so much I want to
The
say about that. Hang on one second. I want to say something about that because I like to state this wherever I can, and I'd love to hear your response to this because I want to tease out some of the left's response or some of the liberal Democratic response to what took place on Friday, because I think it's important for us to talk about because there's so much emotional misinformation about this subject. But the biggest one is this, is that we become the Wild West. We go back to back alley abortions, rusty coat hangers, the moment Roe v. Wade is overturned. And how could you do this for women, you barbaric dinosaurs, is the big talking point for so many on the left right now. You can see it all over The View, and I would watch it if I didn't vomit every time I got close to it. But that whole premise about how many forced back alley abortions took place, how many women were casualties of back alley abortions, was first posited by NARAL, N-A-R-A-L. So Bernard Nathanson posited that there would be 5,000 to 10,000 women who would die a year annually, and did prior to Roe v. Wade, from back alley abortions, from illegal abortions, from trying to abort their own baby, whatever. Now, first of all, listen to that number. 5,000 to 10,000. So he can't chart whether or not there's 5,000 lives being lost in a year to back alley abortions, first of all, which should tip you off to the point that he later admitted to. A lot of people don't know this. The statistics that people use when they talk about these things were totally created. They were totally fabricated, and this doctor admitted to it. He said it was I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said it's a useful lie to help us toward an expected end. That I basically just fabricated those statistics out of whole cloth, that they don't exist. Now, were there people who were so desperate that they were perhaps having back alley abortions or trying to abort their babies manually without the help of a doctor? Sure. How many? Very, very few, and very, very few women actually dying as a result of it. Not to mention, just can we have a conversation about adoption and making that easier so that women don't have to feel so afraid, or that their only option is an abortion, which the abortion industry is, you can lay that at their feet, that they've given women only one option: kill your baby or you yourself will die, is essentially what they've told everybody for years.
Yes, all of the above that you just said is correct. And yes, Dr. Bernard Nathanson, I mean, he actually did tens of thousands of abortions and was very instrumental actually in the Roe versus Wade case. There is a movie, I don't know if you've seen it or your listeners have, but I would encourage people to look it up and watch it. It came out in I think it was 2020, but because of the pandemic, it didn't actually come out till 2021. Mm-hmm. But John Voight is in it, Nick Loeb. And anyway, the movie is actually called Roe v. Wade, the movie. And we showed it, Tennessee, or Greater Chattanooga Right to Life. We had a showing of it last July. And it is just so telling of kind of how the whole Roe versus Wade decision happened. All of the just like what you were just talking about, just flat out made up stuff to get that decision passed. And so like I said, I would encourage people to watch that movie. It's very telling of kind of how all that happened. And the other interesting thing about talking about the pro-abortion side, talking about we're going to go back to back alley abortions, coat hangers, and all that. So what are they doing right now? What is their big thing that they're doing? They're doing self-abortions.
Yeah.
They are using these abortion pills. It's a 2-pill regimen, and that's their big game plan for overcoming the outlawing of abortion, or whatever you want to call it, is to get women to just self-abort with these pills.
Yeah.
Well, that is not good for women at all. It is. And I actually read, it was a woman who was a pro-abortion. She was a pro-choice, quote, pro-choice person. It was a comment on social media, and it was about the abortion pills. And she actually said, I've had both. And if you know Abby Johnson, who's a big pro-life advocate, used to be a Planned Parenthood director, she's also talked about this too. But this lady on social media, she said, I've had surgical and I've had the abortion pill, self-abortion at home, and I would do surgical over. I mean, this is somebody that's even a proponent of abortions, but she said it was awful.
One of the things we want women to understand, talking about the chemical abortions and the medication abortions, the abortion pill regimen, is there is actually an opportunity to reverse that, right? So if a woman takes that first pill, the mifepristone, and then she has regret and she says, oh, I don't really want to have an abortion, I wish I had not done that, she can reach out. There's a website, let me make sure I get this right, abortionpillreversal.com. And there's a network of doctors nationwide, and she can start on this regimen if she gets in touch with one of these doctors quickly enough, and it can actually reverse the effect of that first abortion pill that she took. And hundreds of babies have already been saved through this. So we want to make sure that women understand that it's another one of those things that the abortion industry, they actually fight against it. They don't even want it to be known. We've tried to pass some legislation where abortion facilities would have to give women the information about it. So we're back to that thing of, if they're truly pro-choice, then why do they not want these women to have choices?
There's no mental health follow-up either. We say this is about women, but what about the women who suffer after they've had an abortion mentally, emotionally, as a result of it?
Yeah, I mean, the risk to a woman physically of doing these self-abortions at home. I mean, just one of the reasons that we passed the law that these abortionists could not do these through telehealth, virtual. I mean, there's not even an examination. How do you even know the woman's pregnant? It could be an ectopic pregnancy. I mean, there's so many risks to it. And then, like you're talking about, the emotional side of it, because they tell them sit on the toilet and just flush, because if they look down, they're going to see, and that is obviously a human baby. And then the trauma of what they've just done. And, but there is hope in that. There's hope in healing, right? Yeah. I mean, like, there are also resources. We talk about how many resources are available. There are resources for women to choose life. When they find themselves in an unexpected pregnancy situation, we have so many resources. And of course, the other side likes to talk like we don't do anything, but you're right. You said it earlier, churches, Christians, pregnancy resource centers. There's also, there's just tons of resources for women to help them choose life. And it's not pro-birth like we get accused of being. We have resources for them up to like 2 years old. There's also, there is post-abortive counseling. So through the National Memorial for the Unborn, if you're not familiar with that or your listeners aren't, that is here in Chattanooga. It's actually on the site where the old abortion facility used to be.
Yeah, it's so cool.
And they have a healing program for women. I mean, sometimes these women, they aborted their child 30, 50 years ago, and they're still needing that counseling. And there's forgiveness, of course, when you go the Christian perspective. Then there's also at Choices, they have post-abortive counseling programs.
Yeah, that's so good. There's all these opportunities that we've been providing for years, but there is so little conversation about that aspect of an abortion just because it's inconvenient. But also, too, I don't want to. So hopefully that does justice to this idea. Hey, listen, you may have made it this far with us, and you may be pro-abortion, but I think we need to be willing to have conversations about this and be willing to really talk about things that are not being discussed in the mainstream. One of which being women's health is not really all it seems to be from people on the left, because there's all sorts of things that they don't want to talk about in terms of women's health. But of course, I hope people understand that those of us who are pro-life, we are actually in the court of caring about women to make sure that you don't have to make the worst decision of your life, perhaps, and go through with an abortion, because there are repercussions for that decision, and we want to save you from that. So hopefully people understand through this conversation, we care about those who are pregnant, have unexpected pregnancies, and are in a crisis pregnancy situation, and that's why we care so much about this issue. That's why Roe v. Wade must be overturned. But I also don't want to neglect the fact that so much in these conversations miss this obvious and just glaring fact that there's also a baby involved in this situation that we need not to so quickly and conveniently forget. So I want to read a couple of responses to you real quick, and then we'll kind of move on to talking about what we can expect looking forward in the future. But so I'm not reading these to dunk on people, even though the first one I'm going to read is from the WNBA. But I just want to read some of the responses of people on the other side of this to engage that perspective, because I think it, again, belies not only temerity, but also belies the ignorance of this issue and the fact that people are not considering the baby in the womb with these things. They're conveniently forgetting about that. So here, the WNBA just came out after the decision, and this is what they posted on social media. Quote, "This decision shows a bunch of government that is out of touch with the country and any sense of human dignity." Now, I just thought that was incredibly ironic that they're going to talk about human dignity in the context of abortion. That's not ironic at all to the WNBA. And this is why companies should, by and large, just shut up if they don't know what they're talking about. Okay, and then Megan Rapinoe, which I don't know why she even has a dog in the fight, because she's a lesbian soccer player. But nonetheless, it didn't stop her from coming out and saying, "We know that this will disproportionately affect poor women, black women, brown women, immigrants, women in abusive relationships, women who have been raped, women and girls who have been raped by family members, or maybe that just didn't make the best choice in life." So the reason I think that is also ironic is that one of the biggest eliminators of black and brown babies on the planet, not only Planned Parenthood, but abortion. Like, if you really cared about black and brown people, well, then you would care about black and brown babies. And I guess I almost, you can probably roll with that, but I'm wondering still, is it that the people who are pro-abortion, because it just doesn't make sense to me, maybe that's easy to achieve, but is it that they don't believe that it's a baby in the womb, or that they do not care and they believe that just because they cannot see it, they have some kind of a materialistic fallacy, that just because they cannot see it, it is less important than the human being that they can see?
I don't know. I don't know what they think, but I will tell you some of my just a couple of things in personal experience. One is a lot of it, or some people, which I shouldn't say a lot, some people, they simply want to remain ignorant, willful ignorance. I've tried to have a conversation with someone who was pro-choice. And, as I started trying to just, if you just try to follow the logic, when you say pro-choice, what choice are you talking about? Get them to say, what is that choice you're making? Well, it's, to end a pregnancy. Well, what is a pregnancy? You just keep following that. This person just said, "Candy, I don't want to talk about this." And I thought,
Mm.
so you're supporting a cause or a philosophy or whatever you want to call it, and you don't even want to discuss what it really
Yeah.
is. Because
Yeah, it's taboo for you.
yeah, so
Yeah.
when you get somebody who will have a conversation with you and you can really respectfully discuss it with each other, then I think that's where we're going to be able to change hearts and minds, because you cannot follow their quote logic to logical conclusions. I think
Yeah.
that's part of it. I think the other part is, they did used to say, it's a clump of cells. Well, first of all, we're all a clump of cells. They're just different cells. But
Yeah.
now with the medical technology we have, I mean, 3D ultrasound, 4D ultrasound, we have a window into the womb. They cannot deny, I mean, they cannot logically, now some of them still try to do this, but they cannot logically deny that that is a human
Right.
being. But now
Hmm.
it's better to uh, eliminate that child than to have an quote unwanted, they're going to be poor, or they're going to, have whatever, all these
Yeah.
disadvantages in life. Okay, so first of all, you you think it's better then to just not even give that person a chance at life just because they might have a rough life? I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
people have had a rough start and have done amazing things. First of all,
This is true of the rape argument as well. It's just like, okay, so the person who raped somebody is tried criminally in court, goes to jail, hopefully all that stuff is found. But you give the ultimate penalty to the baby that has nothing to do with this whole thing. You give them the murder, the death
well, and
sentence.
they make these assertions that are also just not true. They're not factual.
Yeah.
One is that this woman, this mother that's been raped and now is going to have to, be reminded of her rapist by having to carry this child and keep this child or whatever. I have personally had the opportunity to hear two different
Mm.
people, different speakers at banquets, and had the opportunity to talk to them. One was, she was raped in college and she chose to keep her child. And what she talked
Yeah.
about was that child actually helped me heal from the emotional trauma of the rape. Of course, rape
Wow.
is awful. It should never happen, but you're exactly right. Why would the unborn child, the innocent life, the innocent person in this equation, be the one that gets, the consequence of it? The rapist is the one that should be getting the consequences. So it's not, the things that they tout are not even factual, that that
Yeah.
it's really adding insult to injury, so to speak, because women do not come out of an abortion unscathed. I don't care what they say about shout your abortion and this was the best thing I ever did. Deep down, they know, and they do not really believe that themselves. I think we're trying to push
Yeah.
down, some emotions and some things. I mean, I've read some statistics like the instance of depression, substance abuse, emotional issues, all of that is higher in women who've had abortions.
Yeah, and I want to just say one last thing about this, because I think it's not only the pro-abortion side of things just filled with logical fallacies. Perhaps it's this too. Clarence Thomas alluded to this in his concurrence when he speaks to kind of the opposition. He says this, and I just thought this was a fantastic quote, and I think this really does sum up why perhaps there is an almost willful ignorance. And I'll read the quote and then kind of comment on it, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts. He said, 50 years since Roe, and abortion advocates still can't coherently describe the rights at stake. This proves the obvious fact that the right to an abortion is a policy goal in constant search of a constitutional justification. So the right to have an abortion, in other words, is not constitutional. It is a policy that the left, that liberals pursue, and that they're constantly trying to attach the Constitution to it. So people, in other words, can be clearly blinded by ideology. I do a lot of kind of research, I guess, on the side on this on this very thing. Of course, people accuse Christians of this, and perhaps it's true in some ways, but we all can and have the potential to be blinded by ideology. I want to state that clearly, especially for those who maybe, especially in the like Christian pro-choice camp, which I just think is totally irrational, but because they have some sentimentality about them that tells them, which we don't have to get into, but in case of rape, in case of incest, we want to keep abortion. That's the loving position as a Christian to make sure that we can secure abortions for people. And I guess we all have the tendency to be blinded by ideology at the end of the day. But it would be my hope that beyond all of the talking points, that we could just clearly see what took place on Friday. And even if you disagreed with the pro-life community and you disagreed with those who think abortion should be ended, I would hope that you would be able to step back for a moment and actually see what took place. And what actually took place was that the Supreme Court created a check against the federal government, and this is what they're supposed to do. The left wants the Supreme Court to be a legislative body for their policy procedures. The Supreme Court yesterday, regardless of if you're right, left, center, or anything else, pro-choice, pro-abortion, the Supreme Court yesterday did what they were created to do constitutionally, which was to be a check against the powers of the federal government. So when the federal government overreaches, takes too much authority into their hands, the Supreme Court slaps them on the hand, and this is why they are not an elected body by the people, so that they can act as a check against the federal government, which is elected by the people. So that when they overreach, they can stop and say, hey, you know what? No, the federal government is not supposed to do this. So point of fact, this is also lost in the conversation. What happened yesterday was not tyranny or totalitarianism or the taking of power that didn't belong. It was actually something beautiful that I hope all people can understand. They took power and they gave it away to the people. And they said, you now have the right to decide. You may not like the decision by the majority in the state in which you live, but it's your decision. It's your taxpayer dollars. I honestly don't know how anybody on the left can disagree with something like that, except for that the left has totalitarian tendencies. But that's side note.
Yeah, I mean, and to me, when it comes to abortion, apart from any other topic, any other ideology, it seems like when it comes to abortion, people's thought processes, their ability to reason and look at things logically and all that, it seems to go out the window. I mean, it's I guess maybe it is that you mentioned earlier, like the emotional, it's just in a very emotionally charged thing. It's a very emotionally charged topic. But I mean, we're talking about life and death here. You know, I mean, it is to me, it is not like any other issue we deal with in our society. It's different. It's separate because it is literally life and death.
Yes, that's so important. And I want to say something about that, and I'd love to hear you actually just kind of speak on this too. This is why I don't think that we can afford to take middle ground on certain issues. When we're talking about life and death, there is no middle position for this. I hope the Christian hears me say that. And I hope the person with a conscience that may not even be a Christian hears me say that the middle is a good place sometimes for compromise on certain things, maybe on like budgetary concerns, but not when we're talking about the life of an unborn baby. I want more people who, especially Christians, I want to speak to my brothers and sisters and just sometimes scream and just say, listen, the middle is a position for squishes sometimes. It's a way for you to polish your cowardice into thoughtfulness. And it takes a lot of polishing when we're talking about the life of an unborn baby, because we need to be addicted to winning these issues and standing up for these things. I hope yesterday was a celebratory moment that we do not soon forget, because we need to get addicted to winning. I think the right, conservatives and certainly Christians, are so used to losing that we feel comfortable losing, and we just accept it as such. Now, people will probably disagree with that, but I don't care. They've been wrong before, and I'm typically right. But suffice to say, in all seriousness, I hope we get used to winning once again on issues like this where life and death are at stake, and that we forget this kind of just adoration, I would say, of the middle. Let me give a quick analogy of this just because it keeps on coming to mind. Just recently, one of the biggest pastors in America preached a sermon series on being in the radical middle, some would call it, and talked about kind of polarization, how what happened in our country in 2020 proved that Christian evangelicals care most about winning very often, and that they're only concerned with winning. Well, I would just tell you this: unless you're addicted to losing, winning is actually a good thing when we're talking about life in the womb. I hope Christians do get addicted to winning when it comes to that issue, because it's life and death. I hope Christians get addicted to the issue of the gender transitioning of children, because these are surgeries and hormone blockers that create issues in children that can never be reversed. I hope we get addicted to winning. I hope we care about winning. And I think winning yesterday is just a reminder to me that we as Christians need to start standing up for what we actually believe in.
Amen. Yeah.
Is that a mic drop? I don't know.
Yes, it was. I mean, let me say, there are a lot of churches who are doing a lot for life. I mean, we don't want to lose sight of that. So, but then the flip side of that is there are churches and Christians, like you're talking about, who I like to say won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. In the advocacy work that I do, I try to get into churches and speak. Give me 10 minutes to just come and educate and talk about, life issues and how your church can help us build a culture of life here in our state. And, what's sad is a lot of them won't. They won't talk about it. It doesn't get talked about from the pulpit a lot. And what my concern is when it's not talked about, then in this case, of course, I'm talking about abortion. We've got a lot of walking wounded, a lot of women who've had abortions, even in our churches. Don't fool yourselves. Abortion is in the churches too. And, if they don't ever hear anything in the church about it, then either they must be sitting there thinking abortion must be the unforgivable sin because nobody ever talks about it, or they're thinking it must be okay, right? Nobody ever talks about it, so it must be okay. And I think the silence is literally killing us, both spiritually and physically. And, if we don't speak truth to our people, the abortion industry, of course, is more than willing to fill their minds with, and especially our young people in our communities, with their deception. And so there's never a void, right? Like it's either going to be truth or it's going to be deception. And unfortunately, the deception of the abortion industry sometimes is winning, but we've got to take that back. And yesterday was definitely a win for us. And I think we need to just keep rolling, like you said, keep rolling with that. Don't expect to lose. I mean, why would we expect to lose? We're on God's side.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right, so with that being said, let's talk about what the future looks like, because where obviously, if we understand this the way it should be, this just takes abortion, puts it back to the states for them to decide. So we're electing officials based upon what we believe on this issue. So power to the people, right? So what can we expect, and what should we be doing if we care about life and want to see abortion eliminated in the United States and become a blight that we say to ourselves, how in the world did we ever do this as a nation? So what's next?
Yeah.
What should we do?
Well, I think voting, who is in office matters. Our laws matter, and so educate yourselves. Vote for life, and actually, Tennessee Right to Life has a PAC, and we will be endorsing pro-life candidates. And our website is vote for, like the number 4, life.org, so people can go out there and get educated. And then just continuing to care for these women, these families who have these unexpected pregnancies, coming alongside them, providing, the physical things that they need, helping them with whatever it is that they need in order to choose life, and walking with them. And, our churches are already doing this. Our pregnancy resource centers are already doing it, but we've got to continue and do even more. So, yesterday was a great victory, but now we continue doing the work. We don't just hang up our pro-life advocacy hat and say, good job, we're done. I mean, we just continue to do these things. So, Tennessee Right to Life will be continuing to work with our legislators. And, like we were talking about earlier, we don't expect Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry to take this lying down. We expect there to be challenges. Right. So we'll be continuing to battle it out in court, unfortunately, to try to keep our pro-life laws that we have now on the books and keep our pro-life legislators. We are very blessed in Tennessee. We have a pro-life supermajority, and that's because people have voted them in. And when they're campaigning, they don't, pretend like they're not pro-life. They, let people know that they're pro-life and they're going to vote for pro-life legislation.
Yeah, that's so important, because one of the things that I wanted to mention that I forgot to when I was talking about Clarence Thomas's opinion and talking about the squishy middle is that it's so hard to figure out who is actually pro-life, because people will get elected and say, well, I'm pro-life, but really not have any pro-life stance whatsoever, do it just merely for political purposes. And I think we have a unique moment here in that now that Roe v. Wade is overturned, we get to actually say, hey, are you going to actually own up to what you said on the campaign trail? Are you going to be true to who you said you would be? And conservatives, by and large, have been so disappointed throughout the ages with that, especially with Supreme Court justices. But we're living in a different time that shows that we can't, just be satisfied with the squishy middle or politicians that lie. We need to hold them accountable, and we need to know who we're voting for. So it's really great that you guys have a resource to do that. So I'm going to put that website down in the description of this podcast so that people can access that and really get to know who they're voting for, and they can trust that the guys that you are getting behind are truly pro-life candidates. And then the other thing I want to mention too is I don't want you to go before we talk about volunteering. I'm going to start volunteering at a pregnancy resource center, and it's so important that men do this, because there are not just women involved in choosing to keep a baby or being deciding on whether or not to have an abortion. There are guys involved in this thing. We don't need to have birds and the bees conversation, hopefully. But it's really important because it's a real missing piece of ministry. So I'm going to try to take on a mentorship role at a pregnancy resource center to try to help mentor men who are in this situation and deciding to carry or debating as to whether or not to abort their child. But you guys are a volunteer-led organization, and I want to give people the opportunity to volunteer with you guys. So if anybody wants to say, hey, I want to take my pro-life stance beyond just even a vote or just a, checking the box, but I actually want to get serious about this, how can they volunteer with you guys?
So I would have them go to our website, which is prolifechat.org. So it's prolifechat.org, and they can get all kinds of information on our website about us. And there's also a volunteer page, and they can fill that form out and get in touch with us, and we will work with them on, what are their interests, what are their knowledge, skills, and abilities that they bring to the table, and how they can get plugged in. So the first step would be to get in touch with us through prolifechat.org.
Okay, perfect. All right. And then I'm going to ask you on this last one just to pull out your crystal ball. And I know we don't really know, but I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts. I like to ask the question nonetheless. Do you think that in our lifetime we will see abortion eliminated in our nation?
That is a hope and a prayer. I'll be honest with you. I wasn't sure we would ever see Roe versus Wade overturned, and God forgive me for even not believing that might happen. So I want to believe with my whole heart that yes, we can make abortion unthinkable, illegal and unthinkable in our lifetimes.
Yeah, we're going to have to change the culture, and we're going to have to change the laws in order to do that. So Christians and people of conscience have to stand up and make a difference if we are going to do that. And that's so beautifully put, because I think that's right. We have a living example right before us. Something that we thought in prior generations would be impossible just happened. So what is truly impossible? And let's make sure that we don't put limitations on what could be possible in this nation, because there are alternatives, and we do not have to resort to aborting millions of babies each year because of an inconvenience.
That's right. And, just think about the efforts that we've had to spend on fighting against just trying to get abortion made illegal in our state. Now we can move those efforts towards even more support and help for the families in
That's
these
so great.
situations.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Candy, thank you so much for being on today. I'm really, really pumped about the future, and joining up with you guys and seeing what takes place in our nation. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I do have one thing, if we could mention it. And I think you go to Calvary Chapel. So on Thursday night, June the 30th, we do have a solemn prayer assembly coming up. So this is being hosted by Hamilton Flourishing, and Greater Chattanooga Right to Life is one of the co-sponsors, and several other pro-life organizations. And so it's at 6:30 at Calvary Chapel, and we would love to see people come.
Yeah, that's great. It's going to be a great event. And I was doing a little bit of work on that event this past week. So yeah.
Oh, good.
All right, Candy. Well, thank you so much for everything that you have done. Thank you so much for the work that you've got ahead of you, because we do have our work cut out for us. But because of you, lives are being saved, and you're a hero. So thank you for everything you've done.
To God be the glory. It's all him. I'm just his soldier.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We will catch you next time. Our thanks again to our guests for being on the show today. Indie Thinker with Reed Uberman was brought to you by our sponsors. If you like what you heard today, please do us a big favor and give it a 5-star review, and like it and share it with friends. And if you want to hear more awesome guests, make sure to check out past episodes. Indie Thinker is a nonprofit paid for by our sponsors and the generous gifts of people like you. In order to hear more great guests like you did today, please consider giving a tax-deductible gift by going to indiethinker.org. And just remember, your voice matters, but infinitely more when you think for yourself.